I feel like I'm being personally attacked by the fact that it's 72 degrees outside and it's December 30th. Like, this is bullshit. I'm doing an ARC recap because I was naughty and I read ARCs over the last fall semester. I shouldn't have, and I know I shouldn't have because I should have focused on my schoolwork, but I managed to get both things done. There were only 2 books, maybe 1 book that I read and I didn't get the review out before publication, and that was Guinevere Deception. But to my credit, they approved me for it like the day before it released, and I was already reading another arc, and I knew I needed to finish one instead of not finishing either. I've made myself a cheat sheet of what I read. It wasn't very many. I've got a good feedback ratio, but I try not to ask for permission for more than I think I can handle at a time. Obviously, because they were on NetGalley, I don't have physical copies of any of them except the Guinevere Deception, but that one's up on my shelf on display now, and I really like that one, but we'll get to that. Let's go through in order in which I read them and what my star rating was. Just for disclosure, I don't usually do star ratings on books I read. It always just seems wrong to me, because just because I decided something was good, if I liked it at like a 3 or a 4 or whatever, you may hate it, or you may think it's a 5-star, and then, you know, we project that opinion onto the other people who read it. Now, I like watching ratings videos. I like seeing what other people think of books that I like, but sometimes it hurts your feelings to hear people talk crap about books that you thought were really good. So I just want to not have that drama. I either liked it or I didn't like it, or maybe it's just middle of the road for me. So when you hear these reviews, that doesn't mean you shouldn't maybe go get the books or pre-order them. You should still read them if you think that's a concept that interests you, and you should decide if you like it or not. Maybe I'm coming at it from a different perspective than you, and that's just why it's not hitting me the same, especially for some of these. Some of these, if you're in a different walk of life, you may like it better than I do as like an almost 30-year-old college student. It's just, that's how it is. So I'll try to tell you a little bit about what all of them are about. Make sure you know which ones are going to be published later and which ones are already out. And then you can decide from there if you want to read them. So it's really interesting. The first one I got on here, I did on a whim because NetGalley had it available to read for everyone for 48 hours. And it's called Phallus Fare by Hannah Capin. I don't know how you pronounce it. And it intrigued me because it's a retelling of Macbeth, but in high school, and basically from the point of view of Lady Macbeth and the witches. And like, you can't throw me a concept like that and not expect me to push all my homework aside and read it in 48 hours, which I did. And it was good. I gave it officially 3 stars, and I have a review on Goodreads. I'll link my Goodreads to this because these are the only things I've actually reviewed over the past few months. So you should be able to find it pretty quickly. I went into detail in my reviews. I want to be respectful to the publishers. If they're letting me read something early and for free, I should give them decent feedback. I liked Phallus Fare. I gave it a 3. I thought it was really good. I remember certain parts of it very vividly, but there are some parts that I just don't. I didn't retain it. I thought the characters were interesting. There is diversity in this book. Like, everybody is very diverse, sexuality and racial makeup. I thought the writing was gorgeous. And you have to come hard for something that if you're remaking a Shakespeare play, which is written like impeccably, you need to have good writing. And this one did. It was very poetic and beautiful and just full of like this fire and revenge. But the reason it didn't get any higher than a 3 for me is that I almost felt unrealistic. The parents and the adults, where were they? What were they doing? Afterthoughts. These were 16-year-old girls. There's no way they did the level of stuff in this book that it talks about. And that's not me demeaning 16-year-old girls. When you read it, you'll know they speak with a maturity and they act with a maturity that is not 16. I thought that the plot was very interesting. There's a trigger warning, and there's very clear trigger warnings for sexual assault, because that is the point. It is a revenge of an assault. And I think it did that very classy, like, if you can call it that. It doesn't go into graphic detail on anything, but the book is very clear it's going to speak on that. And I thought that was an interesting concept, to put it in like a boarding school for 16-year-olds, and the witches are like taking revenge for one of their own. But I thought it was interesting. I think it's gonna have a sequel. Like, I checked on Goodreads the other day and it looked like it said, like, you know, whatever #1 in parentheses, and I hope to God it doesn't. It was a really good standalone. Again, I think this is one of those ones where you might think it's more of a 4-star. A lot of people that had gotten advanced copies seemed to like it, and I didn't hate it. It just wasn't me, you know, like it wasn't something I enjoyed. I wouldn't pick it up again. But if the cover looks like it does on Goodreads, it's going to be a really pretty book. But that was Phallus Fare, again, the Macbeth retelling. It got 3 stars from me. That one is going to be published in February of next year. So that one is not out yet. You cannot get it yet, but you probably could pre-order it. But that one comes out in February. The next book I read, that's the one that I finished so that I couldn't start the Guinevere Deception yet, was The Deep by River Solomon. And they wrote a really interesting book. It's based on a song from, is it called Clipping? I should have looked this up. I'm bad at research. The Davy Diggs is in it from Hamilton, and it's about mermaids whose origin is they were the children of the pregnant women that were thrown off of slave ships. So this is a very interesting book. It's not necessarily magical realism, but I think within the world of that book it would be, because it seems very grounded in reality. You just accept the fact that this happened, that this could be something that happened. What if we lived in a world where the women who were thrown overboard on their passage across the Atlantic gave birth to mermaids, and there are mermaids in the ocean now, and some of them may want revenge, some of them may want to learn more about humans. This was a very literary book. If you do not like literature books, if you do not like things that delve deep into topics, then you are not going to like this book. I liked this book, but I like mermaids, and I like pretty much any new mythology based on mermaids and where they come from and what they are. I was taking a Southern Lit class at the time, and I'm really considering introducing this book to my professor because I think she would have fun trying to factor it into her teaching. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Again, my 3 stars is not a bad rating. That is a run-of-the-mill. You will probably either like it or love it, and you will love it if you, again, like literary fiction and you like things that are more broad. My problems with this one was I thought it was beautiful. The representation was wonderful. The mermaids are a genderless species. So our main character is a she. She calls herself she, but she ends up in a relationship with a woman. And I'm going to have spoilers in here. I'll put a spoiler warning at the beginning, but I'm going to talk about stuff. But I felt like that was really good representation. It was an interesting way to do that. There is a character that it's basically like The Giver. Like, they hold the memories of all the mermaids. So our main character is a woman doing that, like a woman mermaid. And one of her past representations is like non-binary and calls themselves they. And they're in a relationship with a male presenting mermaid. It's a little complicated. This makes more sense if you read it. I sound like completely confused, but I promise I'm not. The one improvement I think that could have been done on this book is I wish it was more of an anthology. Like, I wish it was, and not an anthology, okay, maybe a collection of short stories, because that's almost what it read as. Like, because you got background in other characters, and it took you part of a chapter to realize, oh, we're not even in present times anymore, we're in the past. So it really would have been nice to have that happen. Maybe just short stories on the lives of these mermaids with the thread of the present day story going on. Because that's what it was. That's what it felt like. I'm telling you this. It started with the main character, and she was in it most through the novel. Like, it started and ended with her, but there were chunks of different stories from different mermaids in the past. But it just felt like if they had been short stories and been very clearly said that this was different, this is a different person talking, this is a different timeline, that would be good. I found myself more intrigued by the older mermaid, the one that identified as they. Basically was like rebelling against humans and like led a revolt of the mermaids against the mermaid like government. Like, I want that book. But anyway, it was really good. I feel like there's an audience for this, and I don't know how to specifically tell you if you are the audience for this or not. But it was a really quick read. It didn't take me very long, and that one actually, The Deep, is already out. It came out in November, so you can get it, I guess, any format you want. But I do recommend it, even though I did give it 3 stars. My in-depth review is on Goodreads if you're more interested in hearing my thoughts. The very next one I read got one of my higher ratings, and I also did not finish it in time, and that is the Guinevere Deception. And the Guinevere Deception is very good. It is a retelling of King Arthur from the perspective of Guinevere, except she's not Guinevere, she's a changeling, and she's coming to protect Arthur from what she doesn't know. Merlin sent her, and she's supposed to know when she sees it. And it is so good. It sets up a world in such a natural way, and you're just really intrigued by this character and all these other ones. Everyone is so well-rounded. There's really good representation. Depending on the mythology they're going to go with, it may be gayer than it appears. We're going to see. I won't be disappointed either way. Given the pairings that she set up, I feel like, and that's not the main draw of this series, but I'm saying if you're going to set up multiple shipping lanes, at least make them all good, and she did. I'll be happy pretty much no matter what the outcome is. I need the sequel now. That one from me got 4 stars. Its review is on my Goodreads, so again, I go into a little bit more detail there about certain characters and stuff if you're interested. The next book I read, I also gave 4 stars. It is a complete switch from the Guinevere Deception. It is a young adult contemporary called The Lucky Ones by Liz Lawson. Liz Lawson, yep. And it's a heavy subject matter. Trigger warning to like shootings and school shootings and guilt and trauma. It's really heavy. I cried throughout the last like third of this book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was very well done, but it basically is from the viewpoint of a girl who is the only survivor of a school shooting in a new school where she meets this guy who turns out is the son of the lawyer who's been chosen to represent the school shooter. And it's them trying to connect and not feel guilty and not hold the other one accountable for stuff. It's her lingering guilt of surviving and why she was chosen to live and the others weren't, including her brother. And then it's her parents reacting to the trauma, and it's his family, reacting to the dad has depression, and his mom, doesn't want to take the case, but also thinks everyone should be treated fairly. And what if there's a secret motive that the shooter had? And it's just really heavy, but it focuses on the right stuff. I talk about it a little bit in my Goodreads review. I always get really disappointed when we talk about school shootings as if it happens then and it doesn't affect people. It's a ripple effect, and even people who weren't there, they know and they feel it. There's characters in this novel who said things to their loved ones before they, were shot, and they have to live with that guilt, and it's how you process that and the trauma of surviving. And that's why it's called The Lucky Ones, because, they call her the lucky one. She made it, but like she still has it. Like she still has the scars of that shooting. And it really just was a beautiful book. And then Liz Lawson goes into detail about, call this number if you think about this, or if you know this, and this needs to be done because this has happened. And so she saves all the really super political, serious stuff for after the novel is over, because that's not what the novel itself is focusing on. It's not that we shouldn't talk about that, and we shouldn't talk about gun reform. It's that that's not what the novel is trying to discuss, and that gets in the way of those discussions of trauma and guilt in real life. So that doesn't happen in this novel, and that's why it got 4 stars from me, because it stayed in its lane of focus, what it wanted to talk about and discuss with you, and I think that was really beautifully done. So that's going to be a really hard book for people to read. I thought the romance was really sweet, but that wasn't the main part. It really was how these characters deal with the trauma of surviving a school shooting. So that one got 4 stars from me. It comes out in April of next year, so you could probably go ahead and pre-order it. And if you like hard-hitting YA contemporaries, this will be a big one for you. The last one I'm going to talk about is the most recent one I finished, and it was actually the lowest rated one that I read, and it's called Mayhem by Estelle Laure. Estelle Laure, yeah. I gave it 2 stars. It's not terrible. It's not like the worst book I read this year. It's not the best, and it probably would make it to a list of the worst books I read. But it was not good. It didn't know what it wanted to be. and especially when the premise of it is Lost Boys meets The Craft. It's like 1980s on a beach in California. And now I've seen The Craft and I love The Craft. I've never seen The Lost Boys, but I have an idea of The Lost Boys. I don't know where any of that comes in because it never happened for me. And it's about a girl and her mom who come back to her hometown. It turns out like the women of that family are basically like witches or some kind of supernatural beings. They drink this water and they gain superpowers. Well, there's some kids who have drunk the water that are not from this family, and it's going to slowly poison them or something. It's never really, the lore is never really firmly established, and I like a well-defined magic system. This did not have that. It's just like, yeah, they've been drinking water. There's pros and cons to it. Oh, we've decided to tell you halfway through you can't drink it if you're not of this family. And it's kind of brushed off, and I don't like that. The villains were never really villains. There was no drama at all in this book. I didn't like her mother. The main character, Mayhem's mother, is awful. She's childish as all get out. And it's like a coping thing is kind of what they established, but it's just not well done at all. I don't know what this book was trying to do. And it has too many, like, it'll go back in the past and somebody's diary entry. And, like, don't rely on that. You're using that as an expository crutch when you should be just telling me through the narrative how it's found. Don't use these diary entries for that. Maybe it'll get better. I will probably not pick up a sequel to this if there is one. I'd assume there is one. They leave a lot of ends loose. Maybe if you're a younger reader, you might like this. This may be interesting for like middle grade. But it didn't hit for me at all. So that's why I gave it 2. I don't remember, like I'm trying to tell you about it, and that's usually when I give a 2 is when I basically emptied my brain of that book after I read it. I'm glad I got it done in time, but at what cost, man? At what cost? It comes out in July of next year. Again, maybe if you're middle grade and you want like a YA sort of fantasy, not magical realism, it's not that, but like it's like that. It's definitely not The Craft and The Lost Boys. You're not going to get that here. Unless it's a ripoff of The Lost Boys, because a lot of reviews mention that it's like word for word in some places, The Lost Boys, and the plot is the same. Again, I wouldn't know. I haven't seen it. But it just didn't hold any interest for me. So I don't necessarily recommend it, but you do you. My review is on Goodreads. I do a lot more in-depth talking about it there. I don't like Insta love, no matter what you say, no matter what, logic you're using to define it. You are not in love with the first boy you see, Mayhem. So that's just some opinions I have about that one. That wasn't really a good way to end this on the lowest note, but that's the most recent one I read. I actually got approved for 2 more that I'll try to read in time. Who knows? Because I'm about to get really busy and read a lot of books, so I don't know if I'll have a lot of time to be giving to ARCs. And I've got The Only Good Indian somewhere on my shelf that I've got to read too before May. So I need to read that one first because I need to get that done. But those are the ARCs I read for fall semester. Again, they are varying degrees of good and they're varying degrees of out and out. So if you would like to read The Deep or the Guinevere Deception, then I have good news for you. They are available right now. They were a 3 and a 4-star for me respectively. The other ones that I recommend you get are the Lucky Ones if you like hard-hitting YA contemporary, Phallus Fare if you like retellings that are a little on the crazy side, and Nobody Should Read Mayhem. There you go.